Welcome, everyone. Today's webinar is entitled The Holiday Season After Brain Injury. Our presenter for today is Allison Schultz. Allison is a licensed independent social worker who owns and operates a small private counseling practice called Compassion Collaborative in Cincinnati, Ohio. She provides individual mental health counseling to adults wanting support around trauma, grief and loss, anxiety, and other life transitions and stressors. Her knowledge of brain injury began with her own lived experience of having a mild TBI and then coordinating a network of support for a close friend in his family after he sustained a life-changing severe TBI. She is passionate about supporting survivors of brain injury and their loved ones. Welcome, Allison.
Thanks, Courtney. I'm happy to be here today. I also wonder who all is here in attendance. So if you would like to take a moment in the chat and share if you're a survivor of brain injury, a caregiver, a professional, or coming in some other capacity, I'd love to see that. And I'll go over our agenda while you all do that. There we go. So today we're going to be talking about common symptoms of brain injury. We'll explore different holiday traditions and why they're important. We'll cover three individuals who experience different types of brain injuries, and we'll do that through stories of three people after their brain injuries and experiencing the holiday season. And they're a composite of people that I've known or worked with. We'll talk about trauma, grief, loss, and healing, and we'll end by discussing ways that we can adapt traditions to work for everybody. So let's take a look at the chat real quick. Oh, wonderful. So it looks like lots of folks who work with others in brain injury, lots of professionals. Wonderful. Well, it's so great to have you all here, and it looks like a survivor as well. Okay. So brain injury symptoms show up in 5 general ways: physical, cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and social. The first person that we're going to meet is Annie. And Annie is a stay-at-home mom of 3 children, 5 and under. She recently sustained a mild TBI in a car accident. Before the accident, Annie found moments of peace and solace in the woods and at church. But neither of those places seem to help her relax anymore. Instead, it's just the opposite. The uneven lighting in the woods between the bright sunshine coming through the trees and the pockets of dark forest cover seem to confuse her brain. It's the same way in her church, which is an old building and it's really dark, and then it has lighting coming through stained glass windows. It feels really confusing to her, and something feels different about her vision, but it's even more difficult to be able to describe it to others, what exactly she's experiencing. The first time she went back to church, she mustered up so much courage. The injuries on her face were still far from healed. She felt nervous to be around so many people. She put on her favorite outfit and she worked really hard to feel and act like she was okay. But she must have done too good of a job pretending, because it felt so invalidating when people kept coming up to her and telling her how glad they were that she was all better. And she felt anything except all better. She didn't feel like herself. She also had a hard time focusing on conversations with all the background noise and the other conversations happening. And she kept finding herself getting stuck searching for words that she couldn't think of. Parenting her kids took everything out of her. They're so overstimulating, and when all her body was craving was rest and quiet, many parents of young kids know those are 2 things that don't typically come with parenting young children. She felt like she should appreciate them more now than ever, but instead she felt trapped by them, and that conflict left her feeling sad and depressed. She was trying very hard to surround herself with things that brought her comfort. And the strangest thing happened. As it turned to fall and the weather got colder and she started lighting candles, which she did every year, she noticed that she couldn't smell them any longer. So that's Annie. And our next person is David. David recently went back to work after sustaining a moderate TBI, but he finds he's dealing with headaches, especially after long days at the computer. Also, he's struggling with chronic pain in his back and pelvis, and it seems exacerbated from sitting so long. He's struggling to track parts of his job that used to feel easy. His boss is talking with him about how it seems to take him twice as long to get half as much done. He feels like he can't focus on one task long enough to complete it. and his coworkers are confused by some of the things they overhear him saying to clients. It seems very inappropriate, and it's like his judgment is completely off. David's struggling at home too. Sometimes he's exactly the same dad he used to be with two little kids, but then he snaps at the slightest misbehavior. He has a hard time controlling his emotions with them, and he's taking out a lot of anger on his wife. All of this has really been weighing on him, and he feels constantly on edge, worrying about everything to find answers to his marriage. The last person that we'll meet is James. James sustained a severe TBI, surprising his loved ones that he woke up from a 2-month coma at all. His mom is unsure of how much he understands because he only says a few words here and there. Some seem relevant to the conversation, and others don't seem to make any sense at all. He's still on an anti-seizure medicine because he had one seizure slightly after waking up from the coma, and it's unlikely that he'll relearn how to walk. He only has slight movement in one of his arms. He receives nutrition through a feeding tube, and some friends still come by to visit, but many people disappeared. Although he can't express it, his dad thinks he must feel very isolated. All right, now we're going to move into the importance of holiday celebrations. So I wonder if you might go back to the chat and share some of the ways that you and your family celebrate holidays. What are your favorite traditions? While you do that, I can share some of mine as well. I really love the old-fashioned holiday letter. I'm a stickler to it. We do one every year. And I also really love driving around to look at Christmas lights. My family does that in our pajamas, and we usually bring hot chocolate along. Well, feel free if anybody does want to share any, you can. Oh, okay. Let's see. Picking out a tree together, decorating the tree, and baking with your mother and sister. That sounds lovely. Reenacting the manger scene, looking at Christmas lights. Wow, that's fun. We go to like a live manger at the local conservatory, but to reenact it yourselves, that's pretty cool. And driving around to look at Christmas lights with Kenny and Dolly Christmas playing in the car. Excellent. Here, I'll share a big slide with some of these. So what I want to highlight are just the themes that typically are entailed with holiday traditions. So people is a big one. So a lot of times there's bigger gatherings, you're seeing people you haven't seen in a long time, or maybe you're seeing people you see frequently, but there's a lot of people in one place. Stimulation is big. So whether that's with visual stimulation, with lights, whether it's with noise. So thinking through like Kenny and Dolly Christmas playing in the car, the noise of reenacting the manger scene. So discussing that and running lines. What else? There's food, baking that you talked about, special meals, menu planning, and then just the organization that it all takes. So presents, cards, planning meals, putting everything together. It takes a lot of coordination and extra thought. Why are these so important? Why do we keep doing them year after year? I think that they bring us a sense of security. We know what to expect, so it happens like predictably. It gives our years a rhythm to it. And with that repetition, I think we just feel safe and secure and comforted. So we might have some traditions that are passed down from our childhood, and then we're transferring those to the next generation. Maybe they've come from years before. And one of the biggest pieces is closeness and connection. So we're wired as human beings for connection. It literally regulates our nervous system. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy recently wrote a book called Together. And in the book, he talks about how loneliness is one of the biggest risk factors for serious health conditions in our country. So closeness and connection is so incredibly important. It can also contribute a great deal to healing. So when we think about brain injury, one thing that can often happen is feelings of isolation. James talked about it, or it talked about it a little bit in James's story, how his friends stopped coming by. Sometimes we lose relationships after we've had a brain injury. We may no longer be working, so we may not have that regular sense of connection with coworkers. It may be harder to get out and see people. People may come by a lot at first, but that may drop off over time. And things may start to feel really insular. You might just see the people that live in your house, and that can get very lonely. There's a book called Upside, written by Jim Rendon, and it's on post-traumatic growth. So we've heard a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, which entails negative impacts of a traumatic event in somebody's life. The flip side of that is post-traumatic growth. So it's positive psychological changes that can result from experiencing a traumatic event. And in that book, Rendon talks about how social support has been shown time and again to be a key factor in helping people recover from trauma and from injuries. So post-traumatic stress was studied in mothers after Hurricane Katrina. And what they found is that mothers who had strong social networks had lower instances of PTSD. And then they also studied PTSD symptoms in people impacted by 9/11, and they found that those who had lower levels of social support had increased PTSD symptoms. So this can be so important generally in brain injury to promote connection, but also, and especially at the holidays, we don't want to lose these traditions because it can contribute in such a positive way to healing. So let's go back to Annie and hear about her experience during the holiday season. The overarching theme for her was her loss of her sense of smell. So she went to the doctor after figuring that out with the candles and explored that more. And she found that she also couldn't smell her Christmas tree. So they get a live Christmas tree, and she loved that pine smell in the house. She couldn't smell that. She baked holiday cookies with her kids, and she couldn't smell the cookies, the baking in the oven. And she also burnt her sweet potatoes because she couldn't smell them burning in the oven. So sense of smell is a wonderful thing to have, and it can bring us comfort and memories with things like candles and the Christmas tree, but it's also necessary sometimes in life for things like cooking. And so you can tell when something's burning. Her family tried to go to to get their photos taken with Santa at the mall, and then they tried to go to zoo lights. And it was a little too much for her. She was overwhelmed with fatigue from walking long distances. She was overstimulated from the lighting and the crowds and the noise and just the general sense of overwhelm. They decided prior to Christmas that they weren't going to attend her husband's family Thanksgiving celebration, but her mother-in-law felt so bad that they'd be missing it that she sent her husband's brother, so Annie's brother-in-law and his wife, down to visit her for the weekend after Thanksgiving. And she felt so bad saying no, but on a weekend when she could have had an extended time to rest with her husband off from work with the kids, she found herself hosting. And that just really wore her out. When she did go to her family's for Christmas, there was Christmas music on in the background, tons of people in a really small space. And she again found that she had trouble focusing on really overwhelmed. David took an airplane to visit family for Thanksgiving, and in the airport, he quickly became overwhelmed by people buzzing all around him and all of the sounds that come at the airport. So the loudspeaker, passing conversations, music, and then when you get on the plane, that loud white noise, it felt like it was overpowering him, and he ended up with a huge headache. Not to mention his chronic pain flared up from sitting in that small space on the flight. Once he got there, he found that he wasn't his normal extroverted self. He'd be out spending time with everybody. He'd throw his stuff down and that'd be it. But he found himself to be really preoccupied with getting unpacked. And as he tried to do that, he was looking at his suitcase and the stuff in front of him, and he couldn't quite make sense of where all to put it. And then that motion of looking at the suitcase and looking around and just doing that back and forth made him feel really unsettled. And then the anxiety of why that was suddenly bothering him just added to it and made it even worse. So he finally gave up and decided he was going to go out and visit with his family. And as soon as he did, his brothers bombarded him. They offered him a beer. knows he's not supposed to be drinking alcohol right now, and that was just enough to set him off the edge, and he ended up blowing up at them in front of the family. So James, we know he sustained the most severe injury. His siblings are older and they have children of their own. His parents normally love the holidays and see it as an opportunity to make a big fuss, spoiling all of the grandchildren with exciting gifts, and the grown kids and James as well. This year feels different because of the stack of medical bills and added expenses for care items that insurance doesn't cover. So things like modifying their home for a wheelchair. Presents feel like a financial burden with all of that. And with the hard work and time that rehab takes up, James's dad couldn't justify spending time crafting his annual Christmas letter or addressing envelopes. His mom looks forward to including each of her children's favorite dish on the menu, but it felt really hard to think about how James couldn't enjoy turkey like he used to. They used to spend New Year's at James's aunt's annual party, but she lives in a brownstone with 6 steps. Even if they could get James's wheelchair in, it would feel really different to attend that party with all of the changes, especially because James, who used to be the life of the party, can no longer communicate verbally. So, one thing that's very important with brain injury is all of the extra work it takes to manage emotions, moods, and energy levels. Regulation is key to this. And two of the most important factors are rest and predictable, consistent routines. These are things that typically are first to go in the holiday season. There's a lot to pack in. You're busier than normal. Rest is the first to go, and everything's different. So, doctors are out on vacation, physical therapists are out on vacation, you're missing your appointments, you're adding other things in. So all of that predictability and the consistency that's really important, it just suddenly goes out the window. And this can result in chronic symptoms flaring up, whether it's an increase in anxiety, irritability, or chronic pain and fatigue. Even seizures can be triggered by this. And cognitive difficulties can seem to get even worse. So it can be even harder to concentrate, even harder to remember things, and just lots of mood swings. So those are some of the things that we want to watch out for and that we commonly see. So before we get to how we can adapt for the holidays, it's really important to recognize that brain injury, in addition to a physical trauma, is an emotional trauma. And the holidays have those emotional ties to us. They're important for us. So it would be really hard to just say, well, this clearly isn't working anymore, and we'll just change it and that'll be fine, right? We're going to have feelings associated with that. So I want to highlight how we can work through that process and how we can emotionally explore the impact of the secondary loss of losing holiday traditions or having to change holiday traditions in relation to the emotional trauma that brain injury is. So Judith Herman is one of the founding mothers of research and healing from emotional trauma. She gave us the 3-part model in the 90s that forms the backbone of what many counselors and helping professionals still use today. First, we start with safety. And in brain injury, we might think of this as stabilization. So we have to get the logistics in order before we can begin to emotionally process what we've experienced. This may look like alerting an employer that you won't be coming back to work right away, or that just telling them what happened and figuring out if you can get an accommodation. You might need to manage childcare needs. You might need to understand what your medical care is going to entail. Once some of those basic needs are met, then we can begin to move into mourning. For mourning, we're going to look at Dr. Teresa, our processes. So she outlined 6 processes that we go through as we're mourning a loss. These are the first 4. And Dr. Rando is a clinical psychologist and researcher who specializes in grief and loss. So in the first process, we recognize the loss. There, you're essentially teaching your brain what happened. So if you've ever had the experience where you've experienced a significant change and you wake up the next day, or something really bad happened and you wake up the next day and you think to yourself, is that real? Did that really happen? And that may happen for a week or 2 weeks or a month even. Your brain's having to adjust and relearn what your new reality is. So once you sort of wrap your mind around that, then you can react to the loss. This is the stage we think of when we think of grief. So that's when you're feeling and expressing all of those emotions: sadness, denial, anger, bargaining, everything that entails. And you're reacting to secondary losses too. So you might be grieving the fact that you may need to leave your home to move to a different home. You might be grieving a loss of mobility. You might be grieving how your relationship is different with your spouse. So that's reacting to the loss. And then you move into recollecting and re-experiencing. So here you're diving deeper. You might be sort of breaking up the events of the narrative that you experience. So the traumatic memories and looking at them piece by piece. You might be acknowledging good things and bad things. So you might be looking at, well, if this were different, this would be worse. And you might be hanging on to things that you still have. And then you're relinquishing old attachments and assumptions. So here you're exploring what's shifted. And this can be personally on a micro level within your life and your relationships, but it's also looking at it in a larger way in terms of how you view the world. So this is where people might be making peace with this new reality where it feels like there's no guarantees in life. And you maybe always knew that, but you understand it on a different level now. This can be grappling with the idea that everything can change in a moment. And these aren't tasks to be checked off. They're much more fluid than rigid. You can return to them again and again. And you might return to some and not all of them. But generally, this is a good process to walk through when you're mourning. And then coming back to Judith Herman's model, she ends by discussing reconnection. So you've established safety, you've mourned your losses, and then how do you move forward into the world? And we'll return to Rando's 6 processes because they parallel really nicely with Herman's model for reconnection. So Rando's last 2 processes are to readjust and to reinvest. So when we readjust, this is where we accommodate the loss. We figure out how to live alongside it and how to incorporate it into who we are. Dr. Rando explains it really well when she says we move adaptively into the new world without forgetting the old. So that's the readjustment phase where we're adopting a new identity, new rituals, holiday rituals included, and new routines. We also reinvest. So with reinvest, I like the idea of integrating the loss within ourselves and sort of incorporating it into the plot of our narrative. So thinking through, okay, this is the chapter we're on in the book, and what do I want my next chapter to be, given everything that I've experienced up to this point? So we'll come back to that later. But first, let's start with how to do reinvest. And we're going to look at this specifically with the holidays. So I can't say it enough. Rest, rest, and more rest. Think about how much rest you normally need to stay on top of your recovery and double it if you're able to. Literally put it on your calendar that you need to make time to rest. If you can rest well, everything else will go better. Next, thinking through what part of the day you have the most energy during and how can you plan events accordingly. So you might do this, for example, with physical therapy. Physical therapy takes a lot of energy. And so you might be really proactive about getting an appointment for that at 10 in the morning instead of 4 in the afternoon. Can you do the same thing with holiday traditions? So instead of, doing a Christmas dinner, can you have a Christmas brunch? And how can you apply that to other events that you're participating in? And then doing less. So let's say that you love going Christmas shopping with your mom every year. The two of you make a day of it, you knock everybody out, and you just get it all done, and then you come home and you wrap presents all evening. Maybe you can keep that tradition with your mom, and maybe you go to one store together and you get a few presents, but then you shift it and you come home, you turn on some soft Christmas music. You maybe have some hot chocolate if you're able to, and you sit together and you choose presents for everybody, but online shopping. So maybe you're utilizing Amazon this year. Can you do the Santa picture or zoo lights? So what would Annie's Christmas experience be if she had chosen one or the other? Maybe limiting gatherings to one a day, or one a weekend, or one a week, or maybe no gatherings this year. That's where knowing your limits comes in. Think through what it's going to be like. And if it's not going to work for you, remembering that it's okay to say no. I know that this is hard, but saying no to something could mean saying yes to something else. So, how would it have looked different if Annie had said, "No, I don't think you should come Thanksgiving weekend. I'm going to work really hard on catching up on my rest that weekend." And maybe that would have given her recovery a little bit of a boost, and she would have been able to enjoy Christmas more. And then adaptive devices. So, what would it have looked like if David brought earbuds or headphones into the airport? Maybe he could wear sunglasses. One person I knew intentionally wore her baby like on the front of her to create sort of like a little bubble, because nobody's going to come up that close to her to touch the baby. And so just thinking through how can you be proactive with your person and the and all of your sensory receptors to manage some of that stimulation. And you can manage stimulation in private places too. So maybe you're going to have the Thanksgiving football games on mute this year, or maybe you're going to have people watch those in the basement where it can be on, but then the person with the brain injury can plan to be upstairs. Or maybe you're going to do quiet Christmas hymns in the background instead of like Mariah Carey Christmas or something like that. And then having an option for mocktails so that everybody can enjoy. And maybe that could be a fun new tradition and everybody could get really on board with that. And the kids could be included too if it's a mocktail. Okay. So, recalling Annie's story when she went to church and everybody assumed that she was all better. She had injuries on her face, but many times a person with a brain injury will not. And so largely it can be an invisible injury. So thinking through that, um, think about how you can plan ahead. Can you share with others what a part of what you're experiencing so that they know more of what you're going through so that they don't think that you're just all better or doing fine, even if you look fine? And some of that may be coming up with a script. So hard questions are a piece of that. A lot of times people are going to come up to you and they're going to say, "How are you?" And that's a huge question and it's very vague. And you might answer that question very differently with different people. So I like to use this diagram. So picture yourself at the center. And then in that circle that's right next to it with the orange slice, there's maybe 2 to 5 of your closest people. And those people, when they want to know how you are, they may get more information than the people in the yellow slice, the lemon slice. So in the lemon, there might be like 5 to 10 people there. And then more people are in the lime circle, but they're not as close to you as the orange people and the lemon people. By the time you get out to the grape circle, there's hundreds of people there. Think about everybody you know from maybe a child's Cub Scout troop or pack, to PTA parents at school, to coworkers, to, maybe your mom's best friends who are also close with you, to maybe like the people you in your book club and neighbors and your rec soccer league. Like we develop lots of relationships, but not all of those people are going to get to know the stuff that the people in the orange circle need to know. So when you know that people are going to say, "How are you? How have you been? How's your recovery?" If somebody falls in the lemon circle, you might be able to share with them, well, I feel pretty discouraged. I was hoping to make more progress by now, and I haven't. And maybe somebody in the lime circle, you're not going to be sharing that emotion of discouragement, but you might share with them, oh, well, in physical therapy, I'm working on this particular skill. And you kind of distance yourself from it and just kind of give them a fact. That's what you're working on. And then if somebody in the grape circle asks you, you might not want to share anything with them at all. Maybe you would redirect the conversation to them. So you might ask them, oh, I heard you got a promotion. Tell me how work is going. Or I heard that you spent some time out west this summer. Tell me how your trip was. So that's a good way to think through, who are you going to see? What circles are they going to be in? And what do I want to share with them ahead of time? And going back to our slide about readjusting, it talks about utilizing your support system. So this may be a time similar to right after your injury, when people kind of showed up out of the woodwork and everybody wanted to help, everybody wanted to pitch in. People may be thinking of you again at the holidays, and they may want to do something. And if you say, oh, we're good, we don't need anything at all, you may end up with dozens and dozens of Christmas cookies to eat. But maybe you could utilize your support system more effectively. So perhaps you really do want to send out your holiday cards, but it feels extremely overwhelming to sit down and address them all. Maybe you can invite somebody from your support system over for an evening and ask if they would help you with that. And then they get the added bonus of spending time with you as well. Maybe you'd love to still get your children's school teachers like a small gift basket at the holiday season. You could ask people, instead of giving us Christmas cookies or a gift basket, could you help me put together something to give away to people in your life who are service people and who you want to thank during the holidays? Excuse me. And this is also a great way to utilize your support system if you happen to have a primary person who kind of shares information with everybody else. They may be able to coach others on how to show up for you. So they could suggest ways that could be helpful. They could brainstorm with you ways that you could use support at the holidays, but they could also ask you, what if it feels really uncomfortable to be asked, how are you, over and over, is there a better question that people could ask you? So maybe coaching people to say, I'd love to support you. Instead of anything you need right now, is there anything I can make your day a little brighter today? Is there any way I can make your day a little brighter today, or your week a little brighter? Or instead of how are you, they could say, how is it going in occupational therapy? Or how are your migraines doing? So asking about like one specific part of your injury. All right. Moving on. So looking at how we can reinvest. This is a huge factor in post-traumatic growth. So it's been shown that people, so another predictor in post-traumatic growth is finding meaning. And so people who are able to associate like some way that they can do something with the trauma that they've experienced are more likely to achieve post-traumatic growth. And that's what I mean by meaning. Not at all that thinking through like, well, this happened to me because of this reason. I think that I just want to say that because sometimes we hear the platitude, everything happens for a reason. And that can be a really hurtful and damaging thing to tell people. And it's not at all what I mean by meaning. I also think that finding meaning is something that takes years, and everybody has to find their own individual path to this. So it can't be forced or prescribed. And it's just very independent on the individual. But I'll tell you a little sidebar story about this. Courtney mentioned that I coordinated support for a family who experienced a brain injury. So while I was doing that, I was looking for resources on how to coordinate support for a family, and I couldn't find any. But it's something that we frequently do when a family or an individual has an acute crisis. One or a few people will sort of organize this whole network of people who want to show up for them, but they're often building the plane while trying to fly it. So very slowly on the side, I'm working on a book that would be a field guide for support coordinators to sort of teach them, step A to Z, how to work through this in an efficient and effective way, how to help the individual or the family in the center heal, but also how to help the community heal. And it will include trauma-informed care and information about grief and loss and how to support people in those processes. So in doing that, I've interviewed a lot of people who've experienced an acute crisis. And one of my favorite parts has been hearing these beautiful, beautiful things that people have done and made out of their most tragic experiences. So I'll share some of these just as ideas, and you all might be doing this in your own lives already. So the toy donation organization, a husband and wife who had an adult son who died in a car accident, created this toy donation organization. It started out as a very small thing within their church, and it's grown, and they're a household name around Cincinnati. So every holiday season, they collect thousands and thousands of toys, and they invite families in who are not able to afford to purchase toys for their children, and they're able to shop in this collection of toys that they've created and choose toys for their kids. And they've expanded so much now that they also give toys and comfort items, mostly like blankets and stuffed animals, to the local first responders, and they're able to give those out to kids after a house fire or after an emergency. They can bring those to children. Cookies for firefighters is something our family did. So a couple of years after the accident that caused my brain injury, we baked cookies, which we always do at the holidays, and we brought them to the firefighter in the specific station that responded to our accident. And that felt very just full circle and brought us and my kids specifically some closure. Decorating the physical therapy gym or the occupational therapy space or wherever you are or whatever service you're using, you could decorate that for Christmas, and that could bring joy to other patients and to all of the medical staff there as well. Legos for Luke is an organization that a family started after they lost their son Luke to pediatric cancer, and he was 5 or 6 when he died. Loved Legos. They started collecting Legos in his name, and they donate it to the local oncology department in their children's hospital. Benji is the person who sustained the traumatic brain injury whose family I supported. Excuse me. And when the Bengals were in the Super Bowl, he was practicing writing, and he wrote "Sunday we win." And a friend of the family took that with her Cricut, and she put it on t-shirts with the Bengals logo, and she sold them to this huge community of friends. And so it created all of this unity that everybody had like a Benji's Bengal t-shirt. And then with all of the profit that she made from that, she gave it right back to the family, and they were able to use it for their children's extracurricular activities for that year, which was huge because brain injury can be such a financial hardship. So it was great to be able to supplement that money. So those are just some ideas of how to reinvest at the holidays or generally. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. So at this time, I would love to open it up for questions if anybody has any.
I've just made it, sorry, I've just made it possible if anybody wants to come off of mute. I have made that possible, so you can certainly use the chat box, or you can take yourself off of mute, make a comment or ask a question if you'd like.
Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jessa.
While we wait to see if any comments or questions come in, I'm going to echo what Jessa said and just thank you so much, Allison. It's always timely, especially right now. And this was just wonderful. So thank you very much for presenting for us today.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I think real quick, I'm going to go ahead and put the evaluation link right into that chat box if anybody missed it. And I guess if there aren't any other questions or comments, Allison, if you're ready to wrap things up, if nobody else has anything, again, I just want to thank everybody for carving time out of your day to join us this afternoon. And again, Allison, thank you so very much for your time and talent. We so appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Have a good one, and I will go ahead and end the recording, and then this will be on our YouTube page within probably 24 to 48 hours.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.